Welcome back all my friendly targets to EvE Online with mostly solo PvP, but in a few of these situations we were just in the right place at the right time for some gang warfare. We'll have a healthy mix of random ships used in this video, but for the most part I'm going to be doubling down on the Rifter and the unique Thrasher that we discovered in last week's video. I've been getting some really interesting and good fights with them, so I thought you guys would enjoy it. I'll also be covering a few new tactics I learned inside the battlefields which might come in handy to different pilots. But first, I'd like to show a tactic and issue a challenge to some of the G4 dwellers to combat the gankers. This might just end up being an annoyance, but it's definitely something that would be fun. I'd personally try this myself, but if I go to Jita, I die. A while back I posted a meme video where I took a battle cruiser with an oversized micro warp drive and a micro jump drive to surprise bump interesting ships off of big rocks. And that was a lot of fun, but it wasn't really practical or useful. A few weeks ago I came across a YouTube channel run by a ganker in G4 who covers a lot of tactics used by the gankers. And he had mentioned how he had been battling with CCP in petitions against a suspected bot user, an automated ganker which can loot faster than anyone, would dock up instantly if a kill right was activated, and just became an annoyance that CCP won't deal with. Even New Eden's police force has delved into trying to use different tactics to use the kill rights and get some of these tornadoes off the station, but they insta-dock every time, and they can sit there for hours apparently. If all else fails, this tactic could be used to bump their neutral haulers off the station, which sit in the gank points to scoop the loot, but the real challenge here would be to bump the tornadoes off the station. I ran a few tests in my free times, and here's a quick video of it. I simulated the mass of a tornado with this hauler, which is close, and I found that with using a skirmish link, you can both bump this mass off the station and keep it within point range for most of the time. You could launch some drones to slowly kill it, but this is something that pretty much anyone could do with minimal skills, as long as you can fly a battle cruiser and a command link. It would take a bit of practice. You'd have to line up a bunch of pings and know exactly when to activate the micro jump drive, but if used properly, I believe this could even get the tornadoes off of the sweet spot points where they like to nuzzle into the cracks of the station so they can't be bumped. Well, if you time it just right, it might work. But anyways, I can't go to Jita, so this is up for you guys to try. But I'll issue a challenge. If anybody has any video footage using this or a similar tactic to get the tornado off the station and activate a kill right, I'll give you some kind of prize or showcase you in a video. Just gotta clip it and let me know where it is. Send me a link in the comments. As long as it's a YouTube link, I'll find it. Don't worry about the auto filter. I always check the held for review comments anyways. A handful of different battle cruisers could be used to do this. It's up to you to discover which one's best. I had fun playing with the Hurricane and the Cyclone, but there might be better options. I'll also assume that anybody who does try this can crunch the numbers and figure out the best way to go about it, but one tip I will give you, if you try it, make sure you don't activate the kill right until they're outside of docking range. Otherwise it won't work, because the auto dockers will just get past this. The good news is, if you do happen to bump someone out of docking range, you don't really have to panic and get a point on them as soon as possible. They're going to be moving at some speeds which will basically screw up their alignment time for, well, quite a while. When it comes to capital ships and citadels, I don't really bother to learn much about them, so I don't know what's going on in most of these situations. But what was going on here is basically we had a call out in militia chat that one of our friendly citadels was being attacked. An Astro House. I think it actually belonged to my corporation. So we just gathered what we could and headed on over. When it comes to cheap Tech 1 hulls, frigates, destroyers, cruisers, if you run one Plex, you've already paid for the ship and then some. I had been out running a few in this Vexor, and this already made quite a bit of money, so this was mostly a relaxed situation for me. Also being in an empty head, I kind of just sat there and enjoyed the fireworks while applying whatever damage I could. I speculate that this was somebody who was maybe just about to lapse on their insurance on a dreadnought and decided just to go shoot something, or maybe it was bad timed bait. They were hoping for a better response, but all they got was just a bunch of us in small ships slowly killing it. It seems like when you get engagements like this and the response fleet shows up, it's always cut right down to the wire, as if CCP has magically run some math to know on all these situations when exactly things are just about to die. And pretty much as expected, just as this thing was about to die, one of them big fancy capital repair ships shows up. And I guess this is where everybody just frantically overheated everything. Nothing really to take away from this situation, it was just nice to be a part of one of these for once, as I'm usually flying around by myself. Anyways, it died. What had to be at the last moment, because that capital repair ship was on field for quite some time. Didn't seem to do anything. Anyways, the cherry on top of this situation was somebody in a small ship got hero tackle on a Redeemer, I think it was, or Sin. Nope, not a Sin. The Panther. Panther, yes. This shiny ship. They don't seem to tank very well. This thing melted in a ball of fire. Anyways, me not knowing much about these expensive items, I asked if losing a Dreadnought and a Panther was worth putting the shields and reinforce and potentially killing an Astro House. Apparently it's not. So an Astro House, I guess, is relatively cheap when compared to capital ships and Black Ops. So that's cool. However, there was one big regret in this situation that if it ever happens again, I definitely won't repeat. They came back to try and save the Panther, which didn't work. However, this also meant that they had to leave at the same time with their fleet so nobody else got caught. And I was debating on whether or not just to tackle a random ship that was close to me. I knew that if I timed it poorly, that would be instant death for me. However, if I got lucky and... oh, nope, they all warped away. Oh, I shouldn't have waited and just grabbed it. That was when it dawned on me that I wasn't a Vexer, and I should have just pointed something like right now, because had it been timed properly and got lucky, boy, that would have been one hell of a trade. For a number of reasons, I'm never on comms. I don't even download the apps. There's mostly just the fact that I'm lazy, but also that I'm on and off the computer so much that I wouldn't want to be reliable to anybody who needed it. So, as a solo pilot, I jump into these engagements when the opportunity arises. Thankfully, my corporation doesn't seem to mind this at all. They've never given me any grief about it, so it's why I've stuck around for so long. In a nutshell, I do my part, and they leave me alone. It's a great symbiotic relationship. But as another situation, being in the right place at the right time, I noticed something going down on D-Scan between the two actually organized parts of the militia. Small gang of Amar fighting a small gang of the friendly. Having no idea what I'm warping into, other than the ship types, I don't know who has the advantage, these are situations which I love, because they're exciting. And you never know if your random appearance on the battlefield might sway the situation one way or the other. For situations like this, I have a general rule. If the Tech 1 ship that I'm in has run one Plex, it's already paid for itself, so go yeet it into whatever's going on. And in this situation, it seems to pay off. It looked like we had the advantage on the battlefield, I couldn't be sure, but my appearance did let me get tackle on this Hurricane, which appeared to be out of range of most of the other ships. Yep, either way, if any of my viewers were a part of this engagement, whether the enemy or the friendlies, I was glad to be there with you. With random battlefield appearances, these can lead to a hodgepodge of different ships and tactics. I personally think they're still in their line-out phase where people will discover the best possible way to run them with the optimal amount of people. As it stands right now, I rarely see anybody reach the 30-man cap for the LP payout, so there's still a ways to go. For the solo militia pilots, it can be a bit messy trying to get into these, never quite sure if the people on the inside are friendly or not, or when a fleet's coming to just completely push you off the battlefield. So, for obvious reasons, this can make choosing the right ship for that particular battlefield a tricky situation. Don't expect me to have a solid answer for you. I've had good luck with a bunch of different ships, especially due to the layout of the battlefield being quite forgiving to entering, but I had some good luck with the Republic Fleet Cyclone with an oversized afterburner. Basically, just running around and zapping anything that tried to keep up with me. Application on small ships isn't great, but if you're on the oversized afterburner, they have to use a micro-warp drive to keep up with you, for the most part, so eventually you get a couple of them. However, application on anything destroyer and larger is great, and with this ship's capability of easily putting out 1,000 DPS while still having almost a 100k EHP tank, I am falling in love with this, especially with the oversized afterburner. Granted, the fact that upgrading a standard Cyclone to a Republic fleet is almost free for militia members. Get a Nexus chip and you run a couple plexes, you might as well just turn all of your Cyclones into one of these, unless you specifically have a loadout for shield reps. It's certainly not the answer for everything, but if you're going in alone and you're not sure what to expect, it's relatively cheap for faction warfare members. and effective. Also, due to the fact that these battlefields will usually have a lot of friendlies in small, fast ships wandering around, they can act great for your hero tackle, so shout out to all my fellow militia members who helped me get some of these kills. Anyways, a fun fact that I discovered while piloting this ship on a control zone inside one of the battlefields, I just so happened to have a full flight of medium ECM drones. I decided to put them on the battlecruiser so it wouldn't slowly eat away at my tank. The good news is, these actually seem to be effective on the NPC rats, at least the battlecruiser. At first it was really hit and miss and they would only get a couple of jams, but as time went on, it seemed to jam them more and more to the point where the battlecruiser was almost permanently jammed. Granted, this tactic is only useful for as long as CCP decides not to nerf the battlecruiser's orbit range, but for now, and seeing that they don't seem to fix things very quick, you can look forward to using this tactic. I could predict a small ship that fields a full flight of light ECM drones, or maybe something like a Vexor or Arbitrator that can field a full flight of mediums, being pretty useful with this, slowly keeping their tank alive. And another little bit of a niche, I'd been playing around with the Scythe for quite a while, using 3 medium remote shield reppers to help keep some of my smaller fleet members alive. It was okay and did save a few pilots, but once I discovered that you can put 5 of these on a Osprey and still be cap stable, via have no tank whatsoever, I found a much more useful way to go about this. Basically, I would sit directly in the middle of 2 of the control zones and remote rep anybody who was tanking the battlecruiser. It turns out it's not the optimum range for the best shield repair, however it is still inside of your fall off, so if you're perfectly positioned in the middle, you can keep repped up the friendly ships on 2 of the beacons. Because you're not inside of either the control zone's 30-kilometer limit, none of the NPCs will target you, and you're doing more useful things rather than being a seagull. It's also a cheap ship, and you'll get a lot of love in the militia chat when you save those smaller ships from dying. And as usual, here's another Instalox people kill on the Undock. And for the record, I see flashy things that aren't blue and I shoot it. It's nothing personal. For faction ships, when it comes to frigates, cruisers, and the new destroyers, I generally avoid flying them for the most part, simply because they either don't get very many fights, or the fights they do get are overwhelmed or outgunned. That's not to say they're expensive or they'll immediately get blobbed anytime you take them out. On the contrary. For faction warfare pilots, they're pretty much a free upgrade from the Tech 1 variants, as we mentioned earlier. And when you're outrunning a Plex with them, most other pilots in lesser ships will leave them alone. For this reason, if you want to go out and make maximum LP, ISK per hour, and not really be bothered by many things, they're probably the better option. If your goal for the night was to go out and run as many plexes for LP as you could while being bothered by as few other pilots as possible, they're actually the best choice in my opinion. The Scythe fleet issue being my personal favorite for running mediums and larges, the new Thrasher fleet issue for running basically any smalls and mediums, and then there's the Firetail for running, well, everything else. And with recent changes to how these plexes run, as long as you stay out of the advanced sites, you can basically not have to worry about anybody in a pirate faction ship coming to chase you away. But if your goal is to go out and make LP while still getting fights at the same time, they're just not the best option. But putting that aside, I did decide to play around with the new Republic Fleet Thrasher. To put it as simply as possible, you've got 400 DPS with artillery out to 25k, or 250 DPS out to 50k, and you're still pretty fast. I've been enjoying using this to run medium and small plexes. I'll poke at something if it comes in to test its tank, and then nope out if I don't like what I see. Granted that people are still getting used to these and not everybody knows how they're going to be fit, I've been able to catch a lot of pilots off guard with the Artillery Republic Fleet Thrasher, so give it a shot. You basically don't put any tank on it, you just put a micro warp drive, a sensor booster, than damage and damage projection. If you die, it doesn't really matter because it literally just cost you as much as a Tech 1 Thrasher plus a Type A Nexus chip. With the recent change to faction warfare, at least in my time zone and area of space, I don't tend to run into many Tech 1 cruisers to fight anymore. There was never very many before, but now there's less than ever. I've actually been running into a lot more small frigate and destroyer gangs, which is great because these can be wonderful fights for cruisers. I chop this up mostly being due to the fact that these small 5-man gangs can run the plexes and still get a full LP payout, so it incentivizes them to run together instead of alone. And due to this, they tend to be more coordinated and quite a bit more tanky than I'm used to seeing. For the most part, I think this is great, and I look forward to fitting up some ships which are better suited to combat the small frigate gangs, but can still go toe-to-toe with the occasional cruiser if I find it. However, at the moment, most of the cruisers I see running around are Navy faction cruisers, so not the best choice for Tech 1 Rupture. In this fight, I took out 2 of these Punishers and would have gotten the Republic Fleet Thrasher had I remembered to point it, but we all make mistakes. I don't know if it's a recent change or if they've always been like this, but don't let the Punishers fool you. They're more versatile than you might expect. They can be kitey, they can be tanks, or just straight up DPS. I suspect this gang had a mix of all 3, or at least 2. It's no secret that the Punisher is a weak solo PvP ship, being countered in most all situations. However, when grouped together, they're a formidable force, and not to be underestimated. Probably one of the best assets to have in a small gang when it comes to Tech 1 frigates. For a 1v7 fight, this went better than I expected. I didn't even realize there were that many pilots on the field. I find situations like this to be a perfect storm. Both of us wanted the fight, and it came down to the wire.
A module has connected charges. A module has run out of charges.
I don't know what takes CCP so long to do visual updates to ships which desperately need it, most of Galente's ships, but the Rifter, didn't really need it. However, being what I would consider EVE Online's most iconic ship, got a gorgeous facelift. Not only did they improve the visuals of an already good-looking ship without changing its all-around design, they just made it so that every skin on the Rifter looks drop-dead gorgeous.
I see her rolling up, Uber black Cadillac, high heel boots and a sexy body full of tats. Baby's bad, oh baby's hella bad. After her there ain't no coming back. Wanna take a run at that. I think she's feeling me, turn it up a few degrees. My imagination of her body gets the best of me. Oh gosh, she's such a tease, bitten lips, bruised knees. I'm addicted to her, need her touching me. Cause she got a bad little waist, and we tearing down this place. Off the liquor that we chase, Casamigos to the face. Baby, I don't need no space, coming closer for a taste. And I'll show you how I make everything just fade away. Cause she's like sex, drugs, cocaine, body so insane. Jealous of the clothing that she wears up on that tight frame. All game, no shame, baby came here to play. I feel like an addict cause she's sex, drugs, cocaine. Got a fine little body and her mind's kinda naughty. They say that once you taste it, you cannot replace it. She could get you high, all the dopamine inside triggers fast once she's naked. Her body's a creation. They say the devil made her for his entertainment, but even he couldn't learn how to contain it. Her high heels make a damn good statement. There is no replacement, a body by Satan. She got a bad little waist, and we tearing down this place. Off the liquor that we chase, Casamigos to the face. Baby, I don't need no space, coming closer for a taste. And I'll show you how I make everything just fade away. Cause she's like sex, drugs, cocaine, body so insane. Jealous of the clothing that she wears up on a tight frame. All game, no shame, baby came here to play. I feel like an addict cause she's sex, drugs, cocaine.
For my videos moving forward, I'm sticking with mostly commentary and a lot less music, but for the new Rifter skin, she deserved something, so that's what she got. Now, moving on to the Thrasher that we played around with in last week's video, with 4 small newts and 4 guns, used primarily to catch coercers and other cap-hungry ships off guard, which would normally dominate a Thrasher. So I made one small tweak to the fit. Instead of an afterburner, I went with a micro warp drive, and basically the same strategy. Overheat all the newts, orbit at 500, and wait for their guns to shut off. Now, the micro warp drive was suggested from a fellow militia member who had been trying this out with the Talwar and had some success, so I decided to give it a go, and it does appear to be superior to the afterburner fit. As of now, this has not lost a single fight when going up against its design targets, cap-hungry ships. Nobody's really caught on yet, so they're not fitting cap boosters, and when they do, it's going to be one heck of a compromise. They'll have to decide, do they fit a cap booster for that one oddball situation where I show up, or somebody with this ship, or do they keep their standard nuke everything else fit? Well, we'll just see how that goes. Anyways, if you want more details about this fit, then last week's video goes over it. But it's pretty much just a Thrasher with 4 newts. The video is running kind of long, so I'm just going to blaze through all these real quick and show you the kills I got with this weird cheesy fit. Coercer Navy issue is pretty much just like going up against a regular Coercer, except he's got a little more tank, so it takes a little longer to kill. His gun shut off before he barely even touched my structure. It was the first time I tried this fit against a Coercer Navy issue, so to play it safe, I shut off my micro warp drive to save cap once his gun's turned off, but I don't think I really needed to. Another standard coercer, cookie cutter design, what this ship was intended to go up against, so this pretty much plays out like you'd expect. You'll notice my tank suffered a little harder in this fight. That's simply because I had to burn at him. He was further away, so he was able to get a few more shots on me before I turned off his guns. Going up against your standard kite Imperial Navy slicer in this fight, in this situation, I'm glad I took my fellow militia members' advice and put on the micro warp drive. This allowed me to keep up with him just long enough to shut everything off. This is a rematch against the same pilot with the same ship. He refitted it to a web and scram with no propulsion mod this time. I think in the last fight I won mainly because I was able to scram him before he got away and he didn't realize what was going on with the newts, but in this fight he definitely realized what was going on with the newts.
Module has run out of charges.
Got lucky with another Kikimora. I was able to overheat everything and catch him on the warp-in so he couldn't get away from my newts, and then they drained his cap, and the rest is history. I don't think this is the same pilot we killed in the last video with a Kiki, but if it is, that's unfortunate for him. Talk about bad luck. For the record, if you come up against a brawling Kiki, you're most definitely going to lose, but I mean, most of them are kitey, and your ship is so cheap that you really should just try and kill every single one you see. And when I say cheap, I really do mean it. The newts I'm using are all scoped, which are just dirt cheap. And lastly, one more coercer kill. I saw him dock up, so I brought the Thrasher on the undock and just sat there knowing that if he's any bit of a PvP pilot, he won't resist, because coercers are used to winning fights against Thrashers. They never see this coming. Anyways, I hope you guys got some useful information out of today's video, or at the very least were mildly entertained. And until next time, happy hunting.